Hello, movie lovers. Today I'm going to continue on with sort of a monthly recap, sort of a diary of what I watched in the month, this month of last month of April 2022, and just go through it real quick with brief comments. But if anything that I say strikes your fancy, interests you, I do have 10 to 15 minute videos for each of these titles. I've got 15 titles, and then at the end I'm just going to briefly go over what I might be watching in the month of May. So what's my favorite? What favorite of the film of these 15 was it for me? Well, I got to go with Rainer Werner Fassbinder's The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, part of my 1972 trip through the films of 1972. I was doing European art cinema, auteurs, and The Bitter Tears just totally enraptured me. It's the kind of film that for me reinvigorates my love of cinema. It sounds kind of pretentious, but really there's times when, you know, I don't know if you call it an epiphany or just exhilaration, but I get that with Fassbinder often, especially with The Bitter Tears, one of my favorite Fassbinder films. And it's odd that because it was based on a play that Fassbinder had written a year before with Margit Carstensen, who is the star. She is Petra von Kant. Hannah Schugel is also in it. So it's a stage adaptation of a stage play in one set, but it's just, to me, it's just visually enthralling, and the actors are fantastic. And Fassbinder, it's also, I'm picking it also because it's I'm renewing my friendship with Fassbinder and his films, because I haven't seen them in many, many years. Going on, in Kino, we had two movies from Robert Siodmak. One was from 1930, Farewell. And this too is set in one boarding house, one floor of one boarding house. So it has a similar claustrophobic feel to it. You can see a lot of Siodmak, his style. He was very good at that. That was one of his the psychological torture of being inside and being trapped in spaces that can hide danger. This isn't a film noir, however. That Robert Siodmak was famous for. This is basically a chamber play, but it's so fascinating. 1930s, 2 years before the rise of the crazy fear. And the Weimar Republic falling apart, and the inflation and money woes, and love. There is love here. And the other Robert Siodmak film, he actually is a Jew who left Germany to escape the fear. He came to Hollywood, made all these great film noirs, and then, unlike almost all the Hollywood emigres, he went back and made several films in Germany. This is one of his most famous, The Devil Strikes at Night. I think it's 1957, about a serial killer, but it's set during the war, during 1944. And it covers the tracking down of a serial killer. And then when the serial killer's found out, the Führer says, well, and he had killed dozens of women, at least he claims to have. The serial killer, the Führer says, well, no way, that would besmirch the nation if you know, we had this kind of killer amongst us in Deutschland. And then the other Kino, and these are all recent releases. This is Hester Street from director Joe Micklin Silver, with a terrific performance by Carol Kane. It's an immigrant story where she comes to America and has to adjust to a philandering husband who has been here for 3 years, and finding her own way, her own identity. Terrific Academy Award nomination for Carol Kane. Then let's go to the Arrow releases that I watched this year, and this is Come Drink With Me from King Hu, and I really love this film, and it set me back to go. The Criterion Channel has 3 other King Hu films: Raining in the Mountain, Touch of Zen, and Dragon Inn. And so I had seen those before, but I had to rewatch them after watching. This is so much fun. And King Wu was so good at landscapes, finding strange-looking landscapes to have some of his martial arts battles, but he's really good at the Dragon Inn quality. And there's a great, where the characters are gathered together, the good guys and the bad guys, or the good woman being disguised very unconvincingly as a man, and they face each other off in a long sequence in this Dragon Inn kind of location or set. So a lot of fun from King Wu. And this is a Japanese film, To Sleep So As to Dream. And this is the actual cover art, but I used the Japanese cover art that I liked a lot better. And Asylum film in black and white. It was just so much fun. It's a homage to the detective story, to silent film era, made on a shoestring budget. In the extras, it's just amazing how this film ever got released. It was a big hit, played in film festivals around the world. So again, Arrow bringing out a really good Japanese title that I had never heard of before. I love it when I discover movies that I never heard of before, and especially when I like them. And don't let the silent film and the black and white or the low budget, because they had a great set designer, and you can see every frame of this film is just full of interesting information, and it's a really amusing kind of surrealist kind of movie. Really liked it. And then from Mexico, and this is Indicator. I've got one from Indicator, and this is Larona, a Mexican horror film from 1933. And it's also, Indicator also released The Phantom of the Monastery in that, simultaneously to their release of this film. And it's, again, to discover the undiscovered country. Mexican cinema, the only Mexican cinema I've seen pre-1960 would be the Louis Buñuel films. So it really is great to see how invigorating these kind of films were for their audiences. Silent films in Mexico were all imports, and then they had to make, when sound came in, they had to make their own films. And so this is one of the early horror films from Mexico, kind of a folk horror story. And horror films have a long tradition in Mexican cinema. So again, Indicator with a great release. From Criterion, I watched Anne Hoey's Boat People. First time I've ever seen one of her movies. She's from the Hong Kong cinema. It's a story of the Vietnamese boat people who, after the Americans withdrew and the South Vietnamese were put into kind of economic zones, re-education zones. They all wanted, tens of thousands of them, maybe even over hundreds of thousands, attempted to escape in perilous waters and boats. But this isn't really about the boats. We do see a little bit on the boat, but this is about what it was like for these South Vietnamese to have to adopt to a sort of dictatorship kind of situation that they weren't used to, and they needed to get away. They didn't want to go to these new economic zones, and we see and Hui had spoken to many of the boat people who ended up in Hong Kong to get their stories of why they were willing to go to the extremes of these perilous journeys across the dangerous waters. And then Marta Mezzazeros' Adoption, another woman director from Hungary. This is, I think, what is this? Did I write it down? I did not. And I think it's 60, no, it's 75. She'd made a couple movies before this. And this is, again, we see what life is like in a Eastern European country that's under the domination of the Soviet Union and the Communist Party, and her relationship with a woman's relationship with a teenage runaway, and invigorating her desire to adopt a child, for her maternal instincts are awakened. Beautiful performances, beautiful looking black and white film. And again, you know, I know hardly anything about Hungarian cinema, a little bit, but not much. And then the other criterion, my most recent video was on The Girl Can't Help It. I described it as sublime silliness, and we get kind of parody of Marilyn Monroe as embodied by Jane Mansfield. I think she's terrific in the film, but we also get all these great pop music acts from 1956, including Little Richard and Fats Domino and the Platters and Gene Vincent doing Bebop Alula, and you know, Johnny Cochran's in it. It's just, it's a fun movie directed by Frank Tashlin. He was a long-time cartoonist, animator. His films have that kind of quality to them. They're sort of exaggerated, but they're always a lot of fun. And then I did the 1972 series where I'm, and I have a playlist for, I have about 18 movies now that I've covered so far this year from 1972. And I put them all in a playlist. And I'm aiming for maybe 50 to 75, something like that. My ambitions sometimes outstrip my ability to to satisfy those ambitions. But I did European auteurs, so the Petra von Kant, Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, and then we have the Fellini, from that Fellini box set. We have Roma, known in the U.S., released in the U.S. as Fellini Roma. And this is one of Fellini's kind of episodic movies that have no real tie into from episode to episode, except it's all situated in Rome and what Rome is like, what it used to be like. It's beautifully photographed, Vittorio Storaro. Just a fantastic photography here, but again, no story. But some of the segments are some of the greatest passages, especially the ecclesiastical fashion show is one of the great passages, I think, in all Fellini's cinema. And Fellini was a huge name. He was probably, of all the international directors in the U.S., almost everybody knew who Fellini was. And to a lesser degree, but still, was Ingmar Bergman. In '72, he released Cries and Whispers, a beautifully acted movie with Harriet Anderson on the cover, and Liv Ullmann, Ingrid Thulin. I mean, you know, terrific performance. But it's a story of cruelties, slow, painful death, redeemed, as in the previous movie, by the Sven Nykvist's Academy Award-winning cinematography, where red is very pronounced and very expressive, used throughout the film. Not my favorite, amongst my favorite Bergman films, but you have to respect the artistry and the dedication to his craft that Bergman put into all his films. And then next up is the controversial Last Tango in Paris. This was the most fun video that I've made in recent months. It's a kind of controversial film that you can talk about forever. There's so much controversy in it. There's so much Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider, and the whole the reception, hyperbolic reception, and the controversy for the sexual explicitness in the film. You know, it was really a lot of fun, and I dreaded seeing this because of its controversy, and because I didn't like it much in 1972. But you know, it was a real surprise for me in the historical context of the film. Sometimes are more interesting than the films itself. But this is a beautiful looking film for sure. Next up in these 1972 movies was Eric Rohmer's Love in the Afternoon. Rohmer, but exactly the opposite of the director Bernardo Bertolucci of Last Tango. Very quiet, very laid back contemplative style. Again, though, it's about male-female relationships, and is part of the Eric Rohmer's Comedies and Proverbs, which centers around a man having to choose between two different women, which is the right choice to make. Who you end up with in life is, as many people point out, is one of the most important decisions you ever make in your life, and that's what the Comedies and Proverbs is very much about. And this is not my favorite of the Comedies and Proverbs, but boy, it is a really it was very interesting to revisit this film. It was called Chloe in the Afternoon in the U.S. The title is the main character, one of the main characters played by Zuzu is named Chloe, and it's the title I always preferred. And then the last of these films from 1972 is Louis Buñuel's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeois. Just a beautiful, I don't even know how to describe it. Buñuel was off on in his own cinematic world, and it's just great to enter it. You can say, well, what does it all mean? This is real surrealism. This is Buñuel going back to the 1920s and Salvador Dali and the surrealist of the 1920s. This is one of his most surreal movies. And it's also I think it's the funniest movie, and every time I see it, I think it's funnier and funnier. It has a great cast with Fernando Rey and Stefano Adrian and Delphine Seyrig and Boulanger. Just a delightful movie from 1972. That was the winner of the Best Foreign Film Oscar of its year. So what's coming up? Just briefly, I'll be looking at a recent Criterion release, Miracle in Milan, from Vittorio De Sica, and the screenplay written by Cesare Zavattini, and he was the father of Italian neo-realism, and Vittorio De Sica made some films, Bicycle Thief and Umberto D, that were very much part of Italian neo-realism. This is out-and-out comedy. I haven't seen this in so long, I don't remember much about it, so I'm kind of looking forward to seeing this. And I also recently received the new Arrow box set of 4 more late Claude Chabrol movies that they entitled Twisting the Knife. And I'm definitely going to be watching these soon, and they include The Swindle, The Color of Lies, The Flower of Evil, and Nightcap. So look for these for anybody who likes Claude Chabrol. And I do have a playlist for Claude Chabrol as well. And then I'm also going to be digging into some of the movies in America Lost and Found, the BBS story. I'm definitely doing The King of Marvin Gardens, because that's a 1972 movie, but I want to see The Last Picture Show, Safe Place, Drive, he said, for sure. And I'll probably be doing some videos on that. And then I have some other things. I haven't seen the last 3 films in the Fellini set. There's 2 more films in the Buñuel set. And Alfred Hitchcock, and that's the Universal 4K UHD of the first box set that they put out, but there's a new one coming out in May that includes a lot of the films that I'm a big Alfred Hitchcock fan, but they're also releasing them singly, and the one I'm going to be getting for sure is the 4K of UHD of Shadow of a Doubt. And I've never delved into this. I've watched a couple of films in this Steven Spielberg set, so I might do 1 or 2 of those in the month of May, or at least in the next few months. Okay, thanks as always for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.